The Wolf King was about to be struck until she threw herself in front of him. The forests below whispered secrets in the language of rustling leaves and the low hum of hidden creatures. Within the palace perched on the cliff's edge, the heart of the kingdom pulsed with power and mystery. Here ruled Prince Kale, heir to a legacy both feared and revered, the legacy of the Wolf King. Kale moved silently through the corridors of the palace, his footsteps muffled against the cold stone floors. His presence was a mixture of elegance and quiet menace, the sharp intelligence in his eyes softened only by the rarest flashes of human warmth. For centuries, his lineage had borne a curse. Each Wolf King carried within him the spirit of the forest's mightiest predator, a wolf whose instincts could both protect and destroy. Those who met him often felt the pull of danger and fascination at the same time. On this evening, the courtyard was alive with the sounds of preparation for the Festival of Moons, a tradition honoring the bond between the kingdom and the spirits of the wild. Servants hurried along the marble paths, carrying lanterns that glimmered like captured stars. Kale paused at a balcony overlooking the central garden, his eyes scanning the gathered nobles, each smile carefully rehearsed, each bow measured. He had grown accustomed to the formality of the court, but tonight there was an unfamiliar stir in the air, something that made the wolf within him restless. Her name was Seraphine. She appeared at the palace gates as if carried by the wind itself, a healer with hands that held gentleness and eyes that reflected quiet strength. Rumors of her gifts had reached even the farthest corners of the kingdom. Some whispered that she could see into the future, glimpsing threads of destiny that others dared not touch. Others believed her to be a child of the forest, sent to remind the Wolf King that humanity still existed beneath the weight of his cursed blood. Kale noticed her immediately, a pale figure moving gracefully across the courtyard, her dark hair flowing like a river of night. He did not know why, but a strange tension coiled in his chest. It was neither anger nor curiosity. It was something deeper, an instinct that whispered, "She is not like the others." As Seraphine approached the garden, Kale descended the spiral stairs with the quiet assurance of a predator. The moonlight caught the angles of his face, highlighting the sharp jaw and the dark eyes that seemed almost too alive. She looked up, startled, and their gazes met. "You must be Prince Kale," she said softly, her voice carrying a warmth that contrasted with the chill of the evening. "And you are?" he asked, his tone neutral though not unkind. "Seraphine," she replied. "I come with no demands, only guidance, perhaps warning." Kale raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Warning?" she nodded, stepping closer. "I saw something tonight, something that could change everything. I came as soon as I could." Her words hung between them, fragile yet urgent. Kale studied her, sensing the truth behind her eyes. The court had always been filled with lies and flattery, yet here was someone who carried her own truths like armor. He felt a pull, unexplainable, drawing him toward her. Before he could speak again, a sudden commotion erupted near the palace gates. Shouts tore through the air and Kale's instincts flared. Without hesitation, he moved toward the source, the wolf within him stirring with the scent of danger. A figure lunged from the shadows, a man clad in dark armor, blade glinting in the moonlight. The assassin's strike was precise, aimed to end the life of the Wolf King. Time slowed, and Kale's body reacted before his mind could command it. But then Seraphine stepped forward. She flung herself in front of him, arms outstretched, her body a shield against the deadly blade. The world seemed to shatter in that instant, the clang of metal, the gasp of the crowd, the silent scream of instinct meeting fate. Kale's heart twisted, caught between fear, rage, and disbelief. The blade struck her shoulder instead of him. She cried out, pain mingling with determination, yet she remained steadfast, holding the line against the threat. "Seraphine!" Kale roared, his voice echoing across the courtyard. He moved faster than thought, seizing the assassin in a grip that was both human and wolf. The man struggled, but Kale's strength was unmatched. With a swift motion, the assassin was disarmed and thrown to the ground. The court erupted in a mixture of panic and awe, but Cale barely noticed. His focus was entirely on Seraphine, who knelt on the ground, blood staining her white robes. She met his gaze, and for the first time Cale felt a crack in the fortress of his control. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice unsteady. She managed a small, pained smile. "I had to. I couldn't let you die." The words struck him with more force than any blade ever could. Cale felt the wolf within him stir uneasily, sensing vulnerability and defiance entwined in a single human heart. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder, careful yet firm. "You shouldn't have," he murmured. "You risked your life for me." Seraphine's eyes were steady, unwavering. "Some things are worth more than fear. Some lives, even those burdened with curses, are worth protecting." Cale looked at her then, truly looked, and for a moment the palace, the shadows, and even the curse that bound him faded. All that remained was the strange, potent connection between them, as if the threads of destiny had chosen to twist them together tonight. The court physicians rushed forward, murmuring hurried words and urging Seraphine to be taken inside. Cale's hand lingered for a moment, reluctant to let go, before finally allowing her to be guided away. He remained in the garden long after the crowd dispersed, the moonlight tracing the lines of his face. His heart, so long accustomed to cold calculation, now thumped with a warmth that was both thrilling and terrifying. Cale had faced countless enemies, but nothing had ever struck him like the sight of her courage, standing against death itself. Night deepened, and the forest beyond the palace seemed to hum with quiet approval, or perhaps it was warning. Cale's wolf senses, always alert, twitched at a hidden tension in the air. There were forces in this world he did not yet understand, shadows that moved unseen, and perhaps a destiny that was already beginning to right itself in ways he could not control. Later, when the palace settled into silence, Cale found himself pacing the balcony again, staring at the path Seraphine had taken. Questions filled his mind. Why had she come? How had she known? And most unsettling of all, why did the thought of losing her fill him with an ache he had never known? The night was quiet, save for the whispering winds that carried secrets from the forest. Cale clenched his fists, his mind a tempest. The Wolf King, feared and unyielding, was suddenly confronted with something he could neither fight nor command. A human heart, steadfast and unyielding, that had dared to cross the line between life and death for him. And in that quiet, under the pale moonlight, a single truth became painfully clear. His life, no matter how steeped in power, had changed forever. Somewhere in the distance, a shadow moved along the edge of the forest. Cale's instincts flared, and for the first time in centuries, he felt the weight of uncertainty press against him. He did not know what lay ahead, only that the threads of fate had intertwined his life with Seraphine's, and that nothing could undo the bond formed in the breath of a single, fateful act. Cale's eyes, dark and stormy, lifted to the moon. The wolf within him growled low, a sound that was part warning, part longing. He whispered into the night, a promise meant for no one but the one who had thrown herself in front of him. "You saved me, but I fear the cost has only just begun." And somewhere, beyond the walls of the palace, the forest rustled as if answering him. The next morning dawned over the Wolf Kingdom with a thin veil of mist curling across the cliffs and spilling into the forest. The palace, usually alive with the sounds of preparation and ceremony, felt muted. Whispers of the previous night's events had spread quickly through the court, carried by servants, nobles, and guards alike. The entire kingdom seemed to be holding its breath. Cale moved through the corridors with his usual quiet grace, but there was something different in his steps. The wolf inside him, ever alert, prowled just beneath his skin. Seraphine's act of bravery haunted him. Her bloodied shoulder, her determined gaze, her refusal to let him die, each image replayed endlessly in his mind. He could not escape the feeling that his life had shifted in ways he did not yet understand. The council chambers were filled with the usual figures of power: advisors in ornate robes, generals with stern faces, and ministers whose smiles were measured. But Cale's attention wandered. His eyes continually scanned the doorway, expecting Seraphine to appear at any moment. It was not long before she did. She moved through the chamber with quiet confidence, her presence a contrast to the stiff formality of the court. Her dark hair was neatly pinned, and though her shoulder was bandaged, she walked as if nothing had happened. Cale's heart stirred involuntarily, a reminder that even centuries of control could not tame the instincts that now pulled him toward her. "You should not have come here," he said, his voice low, careful not to betray the storm inside him. Seraphine met his gaze without hesitation. "I was asked to remain, and I will not hide from what I know to be true." Cale frowned, intrigued and wary. "And what is it you know?" "I saw the threat last night. Not just the assassin, but something darker, something waiting." Her voice carried a weight that made even the most seasoned advisors pause. "You are not safe, not yet. There are forces in the shadows that seek to claim you, Cale, not for the throne, but for the curse that binds you." The room grew tense. Few had dared speak so directly to the Wolf King, and even fewer had dared to name the curse that lay upon his lineage. Cale's wolf instincts bristled, not with anger but with the strange ache of recognition. Seraphine had not spoken from fear. She had spoken from certainty. "Then you will stay," Cale said finally, his tone decisive. "Not because I command it, but because I cannot allow you to face these dangers alone." Seraphine inclined her head. "I do not intend to, but neither can I leave you to fight without knowing what is coming." For the next few days, Seraphine remained in the palace, moving among the courtiers with grace and purpose. She tended to the injured, offered counsel, and quietly observed Cale. She saw the weight he carried, the burden of expectation, the constant tension between the wolf and the man, the loneliness that no crown could disguise. And though she did not speak of it, Cale felt her understanding, a balm to the constant vigilance that defined his life. One evening, Cale summoned her to the palace library, a vast chamber filled with ancient texts, scrolls, and forbidden tomes. The scent of old parchment and waxed wood filled the air. The moonlight streamed through high windows, casting silver patterns across the floor. "I need answers," Cale said, his fingers brushing over the spines of the books. "The assassin was only the beginning. I can feel it. Something moves in the shadows, waiting for me to falter." Seraphine stepped closer, her eyes reflecting the faint light. "You cannot face this alone, and you should not. Your curse, it is tied to power, yes, but also to your choices. There is strength in restraint, Cale, as much as there is in fury." Cale turned to her, caught between disbelief and hope. "Restraint? My entire life has been a struggle against what I am. The wolf within me grows stronger each time I act without control. Are you suggesting I should hold back?" "I am suggesting," she said, "that love and loyalty can temper the wolf. That even cursed hearts can choose their path, but you must trust someone, and I hope that someone can be me." The words struck Cale deeply. He had always been solitary, driven by the demands of his kingdom and the pull of the wolf. But her presence, steady and unwavering, offered something he had never experienced: choice. And for the first time, he wondered if perhaps the wolf could coexist with the man, if power could exist alongside trust and affection. Days turned into nights filled with whispered discussions and quiet moments stolen in the gardens or the library. Cale and Seraphine grew closer, their bond deepening not through passion, but through understanding and shared purpose. Yet beneath their growing connection, tension simmered. Cale's instincts remained unpredictable and raw, and Seraphine's visions hinted at dangers that neither fully understood. One night, as the moon rose high and silvered the palace walls, Seraphine returned from the library with a scroll she had discovered. Its script was old, etched in a language that had not been spoken for generations. She unfurled it carefully on a table and beckoned Kale closer. "This," she whispered, "may tell us about your curse, about the power you carry and the shadows that seek it." Kale leaned over the scroll, his eyes scanning the symbols, feeling a familiar stir within him. The words spoke of ancient magic, a pact made long before he was born, binding the Wolf Kings to both their strength and their solitude. The curse was not merely a test of endurance but a warning. Every choice, every act of violence or mercy shaped the kingdom and the balance of power beyond the borders. "The wolf," Seraphine said, tracing a finger over the lines, "is not evil. It is survival, instinct, protection. But it must be guided. Otherwise, it consumes everything, including the heart of the one who bears it." Kale's jaw tightened. He had known this in part, but seeing it laid bare in ancient script made the truth undeniable. The wolf was both his greatest weapon and his most dangerous enemy. And now, for the first time, he considered the possibility that someone else could guide it, not by force, but by trust. Before he could speak, a commotion erupted outside the library. Kale's instincts flared immediately, his body reacting before his mind could comprehend. Seraphine's hand brushed against his arm, steadying him. "They are coming," she said quietly. "The shadows, they move faster than I imagined." Kale's eyes narrowed. Without another word, he moved toward the source, Seraphine following. The palace corridors were silent except for their footsteps. The moonlight cast long shadows that seemed to reach for them, and the air carried a chill that hinted at unseen threats. They reached the courtyard, where the moonlight spilled over marble and garden alike. And there, at the edge of the forest, a figure cloaked in shadow waited. Not the assassin from before, but something older, darker, an aura of power that made even Kale hesitate. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face partially hidden beneath a hood. Its eyes glimmered like onyx, sharp and piercing, and its presence seemed to ripple the air itself. "You are the Wolf King," the figure said, voice smooth but edged with menace. "And you are not alone. But your companion, she is curious, brave, and foolish. I wonder if her courage will last when the true test begins." Kale stepped protectively in front of Seraphine. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Why do you come here?" The shadowed figure laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "I am one who watches, one who waits. The curse that binds you is not mine, yet I seek to claim it. Soon, your choices will determine whether your kingdom stands or falls." Seraphine's hand found Kale's, a silent gesture of solidarity. "Then we will face it together," she said, her voice steady despite the chill that gripped her heart. Kale's wolf instincts roared at the tension in the air, a low growl that vibrated through the courtyard. He felt the pull of the shadows, the weight of the curse, and the fragile human heartbeat beside him that gave him strength. For the first time, he realized that power alone was not enough. He needed courage, wisdom, and trust, and perhaps most dangerously, he needed her. The shadow figure's eyes gleamed with dark amusement. "So, the Wolf King trusts her. We shall see if that trust is his salvation or his undoing." With a sudden movement, the figure vanished into the forest, leaving only a lingering chill and the sense that time itself had paused. Kale and Seraphine stood in silence, the moonlight wrapping them in silver and shadow. "We cannot wait," Kale said finally, his voice tight with urgency. "We must prepare. Whatever comes, it will not strike lightly and it will not strike alone." Seraphine nodded. "Then we begin at once. There are truths in the old texts and powers in the shadows that even the Wolf King may not yet understand." Kale turned to her, the weight of centuries pressing upon him, yet tempered by the warmth of her courage. For the first time, he felt the possibility of redemption, not just for the kingdom, but for himself. The night stretched on, filled with whispered plans, the rustle of ancient scrolls, and the quiet determination of two souls intertwined by fate. Outside, the forest stirred, shadows moving with intent, waiting for the moment when choices would decide not only lives but destinies. Kale knew that the path ahead was dangerous, that every step could be a test of strength, trust, and heart. But for the first time, he also knew that he would not face it alone. And in the silent hours before dawn, he whispered to the night, to the forest, to the unseen powers watching from the shadows, "I am the Wolf King, and I will protect her no matter the cost." The wind carried his words across the kingdom, stirring the leaves and the shadows alike, as if the land itself had heard and waited for their declaration. The forest beyond the Wolf Kingdom was no longer a place of calm whispers and moonlit paths. Shadows clung to every tree, twisting around the trunks like living fingers, and the air hummed with a dark energy that made the hairs on Kale's arms stand on end. He had led Seraphine through the castle gates before dawn, determined to uncover the secrets hidden in the cursed wilderness, secrets that might hold the key to his salvation and the safety of his kingdom. "Are you sure this is wise?" Seraphine asked, her voice steady despite the chill that crept through the dense forest. She adjusted the strap of the pack she carried, filled with herbs, scrolls, and items of protection she had prepared. Kale glanced at her, his eyes sharp, wary. "There is no other choice," he said. "If the shadow figure wants the curse, it will not hesitate to strike. We cannot wait for it to come to us. We must face it on our terms." Seraphine nodded. "Then we face it together." The wolf within Kale stirred at her words, a low, constant hum of instinct. He felt the pull of the forest, the raw hunger of the wolf, the tension between his power and his human judgment. He had always been alone in these moments, relying solely on strength and instinct. Now beside him, Seraphine represented a different kind of power, patience, courage, and unshakable determination. The path ahead twisted into darkness. Trees grew close together, their thick trunks and gnarled roots forming barriers that seemed almost alive. The shadows shifted unnaturally, and Kale's senses were alert to every movement, every rustle of leaves. Seraphine followed closely, her hands occasionally brushing against his arm in a quiet reassurance, a reminder that she would not leave his side. Hours passed. The forest grew colder, and the darkness deepened, as though swallowing the light of the moon. Strange noises echoed around them, howls that were too distant to belong to ordinary wolves, whispers that seemed to drift from tree to tree. Kale's wolf instincts told him to fight, to lash out, to dominate. Yet, Seraphine's presence reminded him to control the wolf, to temper its power with his human mind. Suddenly, a sharp crack of a branch broke the silence. Kale's body tensed, and Seraphine instinctively stepped behind him, though her hand brushed his arm in an almost imperceptible touch that made his wolf senses falter. From the shadows emerged the figure Kale had glimpsed near the palace. The hood was drawn low, concealing the face, but the presence was unmistakable. It radiated power, cold and precise, and the forest seemed to recoil at its arrival. "You have come far," the figure said, voice echoing like distant thunder. "Far enough to risk your life and hers." "But do you know what awaits, Wolf King?" Kale stepped in front of Seraphine, protective, the wolf's growl vibrating through his chest. "I know enough to stop you," he said. His voice was firm, but beneath it a flicker of uncertainty lingered. The figure's power was unlike anything he had faced before, even the curses of his own lineage. The figure raised a hand, and the shadows around them surged forward like waves. Trees bent unnaturally, their roots twisting to block the path. Kale's wolf instincts flared, but Seraphine's voice cut through the chaos. "Focus, Kale," she cried. "Control the wolf or it will consume you." He took a deep breath, the growl within him lowering to a tense hum. Slowly, carefully, he let the human part of himself take control, guiding the wolf rather than suppressing it. The shadows recoiled slightly, unsure how to strike against someone who commanded both power and restraint. The figure laughed, a sound that sent shivers through the forest. Impressive, but not enough. With a swift motion, the figure vanished into the trees, leaving behind a faint shimmer in the air, like heat on stone. Kale's body remained tense, every muscle ready to respond, but when he turned, Seraphine was there, eyes wide, steady, and unwavering. "Kale," she said softly, "you controlled it. For a moment, you were not just the wolf, you were yourself." He looked at her, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "For a moment," he muttered, though there was a hint of wonder in his voice. The realization that he could master the wolf inside him without letting it destroy everything was a revelation. But even as relief began to settle, Kale felt a nagging worry, one he could not yet name. They continued through the forest, following the faint trail left by the shadow figure. Each step carried them deeper into the unknown. The trees grew taller and closer together, and the darkness thickened until it felt almost tangible. Strange whispers brushed past their ears, almost like words, but never clear enough to understand. Hours later, they reached a clearing. At its center was a small pool of water, black as ink, reflecting nothing of the sky above. The air was cold, still, and heavy, carrying the scent of old magic. Seraphine knelt by the edge of the pool, tracing a finger over the surface. "This place, it is a mirror of the shadow's power," she whispered. "The curse, it draws strength from fear, from uncertainty. If we are to survive, we must face it together, without letting the wolf consume either of us." Kale knelt beside her, studying the black water. He felt the pull of the wolf, urging him to dominate, to strike, to rely on strength alone. But he also felt the presence of Seraphine beside him, steady and unyielding. And he realized that for the first time he had a choice, not just between survival and defeat, but between the wolf and the man. A sudden movement rippled across the pool, and from its depths a shadow rose, a form darker than night, twisting and writhing, its shape shifting constantly. The figure of the shadowed sorcerer emerged, more solid than before, its eyes glimmering with intent. "You have come," it said, voice smooth and dangerous. "And yet you do not understand the true nature of the curse you bear. It is not merely strength. It is hunger, isolation, fear made flesh. And she," its gaze flicked toward Seraphine, "she is a threat to its balance." Kale rose to his full height, his wolf instincts growling low, protective. "She is my choice," he said, voice steady and commanding. "And you will not touch her." The sorcerer smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "Choice, an interesting concept for a wolf-bound king. But let us see if your bond can survive the trial I bring." With a wave of his hand, the sorcerer conjured visions around them. Illusions of fire, darkness, and destruction surrounded the clearing. Kale and Seraphine saw themselves separated, falling into abyssal chasms, their voices screaming in the wind. The wolf inside Kale surged, reacting to the fear and chaos, but he clenched his jaw and focused on Seraphine's presence beside him. "Kale," Seraphine shouted. "Do not let it take control. Focus on us, on reality." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let his human heart guide the wolf within. Slowly, the illusions began to falter, the shadows quivering and shrinking. The sorcerer's form wavered, his power faltering against the unbroken bond between the Wolf King and the healer. But the victory was not complete. The sorcerer's eyes glowed with dark amusement. "You have courage," he said, "but courage alone cannot save you. The wolf will always hunger and the shadows will always wait." With a sudden movement, the sorcerer vanished, leaving only a lingering cold and the faint echo of laughter. Kale and Seraphine stood in the clearing, breathing heavily, their hands still tightly clasped. "We have survived for now," Seraphine said softly, "but he will return, and next time it may not be a test we can pass together so easily." Kale nodded, his eyes scanning the forest, alert and wary. The wolf within him stirred, restless and hungry, yet tempered by the human heart that Seraphine had helped guide. For the first time, he understood that the curse was not merely a burden, it was a challenge, one that demanded both strength and restraint, instinct and love. The journey back to the palace was quiet, the tension in the forest still palpable. Each shadow seemed alive, each rustle a potential threat. Yet, even as the danger lingered, Kale felt a strange sense of hope. For the first time in centuries, he realized he did not have to face the curse alone. That night, as the palace slept under the pale light of the moon, Kale and Seraphine stood on the balcony overlooking the forest. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the memory of the shadows they had faced. Kale's hand found hers, and for a moment the weight of the kingdom, the curse, and the unknown future seemed lighter. "Together," he said, voice low but firm. "No matter what comes, we face it together." Seraphine smiled, a quiet, determined expression that spoke of courage and trust. "Always." But even as they stood side by side, the distant howl of wolves echoed through the forest, a reminder that the shadows were never far away. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with trials, darkness, and the hunger of the wolf within Kale. And somewhere in the deep reaches of the cursed forest, the sorcerer waited, patient and calculating, knowing that the true test of their bond was yet to come. Kale's eyes, dark and stormy, met Seraphine's steady gaze. In that moment, they both understood that the abyss before them was not just the forest, not just the sorcerer, but the struggle within Kale himself. And the next choice he made could determine everything: the fate of the kingdom, the balance of the curse, and the fragile bond between two hearts caught in a world of shadows and power. The night deepened, and the palace lights flickered like distant stars. Somewhere beyond, the wind carried the promise of trials, the whisper of ancient magic, and the silent vow of two souls bound together by fate, courage, and an unbroken trust. Kale knew the journey had only just begun, and that the next confrontation with the shadows would demand everything he was, everything he could become, and everything he was willing to protect. The Wolf Kingdom lay shrouded in mist as dawn broke over the jagged cliffs, spilling pale light across the castle walls. Yet the morning brought no peace. The forest beyond had grown darker over the past days, the shadows twisting with intent, as if the land itself waited for the final reckoning. Kale stood on the balcony, his gaze stretching across the horizon, feeling the weight of his curse and the choices that had brought him here. Seraphine approached silently, her presence calm yet resolute. Her eyes reflected the rising sun, but her voice carried the same quiet strength that had guided him through the darkest hours. "We cannot wait," she said softly. "The sorcerer grows stronger with each passing day. Soon he will strike at the kingdom, and at us." Kale turned to her, the wolf stirring within him, restless and hungry. "I know," he replied, his voice low, heavy with the burden of command. "And I am ready, but this time I do not face it alone." Together they rode through the forest, their path illuminated by shafts of morning light cutting through the dense canopy. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and magic, the forest alive with unseen creatures and whispered secrets. Kale's wolf instincts remained alert, every sound and movement registering with sharp precision, yet tempered by his human mind, the balance Seraphine had helped him find. Hours passed, and they reached the clearing where the shadow figure had first confronted them. The ground was scarred, twisted by dark magic, and the black water of the pool reflected nothing of the sky above. From its depths, the sorcerer emerged, his presence more formidable than ever, the shadows around him twisting into monstrous shapes. "You have grown bold, Wolf King," the sorcerer said, voice cold and sharp. "But bravery alone will not save you. This curse is not meant to be mastered, it is meant to consume." Kale stepped forward, placing himself between Seraphine and the sorcerer. "The curse is not my enemy," he said firmly. "It is part of me, but it will not rule me, and you will not harm her." The sorcerer's eyes gleamed with dark amusement. "We shall see if your conviction can withstand the true test." With a swift motion, the sorcerer summoned a wave of shadows, a tide of darkness that rushed toward them. Kale's wolf instincts surged, urging him to strike, to dominate, to unleash the raw power within. Yet he hesitated, feeling Seraphine's hand brush against his arm, steadying him. "Control it," she whispered. "Focus on us, on the bond we share. That is stronger than fear, stronger than the shadows. Kale closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Slowly, he let the human heart guide the wolf, blending strength and restraint. The shadows faltered as his determination solidified, his connection with Seraphine acting as an anchor. The sorcerer's power seemed to waver, the illusions collapsing under the force of their unity. You are stronger than I expected," the sorcerer said, narrowing his eyes. "But strength without wisdom is dangerous, and you, Wolf King, are still untested." Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into monstrous forms, towering over them like living nightmares. Kale and Seraphine fought side by side, not with blades but with the power of presence, courage, and unity. Every time the shadows struck, Kale's wolf instincts met Seraphine's calm focus, and together they repelled the darkness, step by step, breath by breath. Hours passed, though time felt meaningless in the battle of wills. The forest shook, the ground quaked, and the very air seemed charged with magic. Kale's body strained under the effort, the wolf within him pushing to break free, yet the human heart, the part that had been nurtured by trust and love, held it steady. Seraphine's presence was his guide, her courage and insight lighting the path through the consuming darkness. Finally, Kale faced the sorcerer directly, their eyes locked. The shadow around the sorcerer writhed, but Kale felt a calm clarity he had never known. "This ends now," he said, voice firm and unwavering. "The curse may be mine, but it will not harm the innocent. Your power cannot claim what is bound by trust and love." With that, Kale surged forward, not in anger but with purpose. The wolf within him roared, but it was controlled, focused, guided by the human heart and Seraphine's unwavering trust. The shadows around the sorcerer recoiled, twisting and dissipating under the force of Kale's command. The sorcerer's eyes widened, and for the first time, fear touched his face. "Impossible," he whispered, but the darkness around him began to crumble. Kale and Seraphine moved together, their bond unbroken, as the sorcerer's magic unraveled. With a final, resonant roar, Kale's wolf form surged with controlled power, striking the heart of the sorcerer's spell. Light, silver and brilliant, exploded outward, consuming the shadows and purifying the corrupted clearing. When the light faded, the forest was still. The pool of black water now shimmered like glass, reflecting the sky above. The sorcerer was gone, his presence erased by the strength of Kale and Seraphine's unity. Kale fell to his knees, exhausted, the wolf within him finally calm, tempered by the clarity of his heart. Seraphine knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "You controlled it, you faced the curse without letting it destroy you." Kale looked at her, eyes stormy but softened by relief. "We did it," he said. "I could not have, not without you." For a long moment they sat together in silence, the forest around them quiet, the danger past. Kale's wolf instincts had been strong, but now he understood that the true power lay not in dominance, but in balance, in choosing trust over fear, courage over instinct alone. As they returned to the palace, the morning sun fully broke through the mist, casting warm light across the kingdom. The villagers and guards who had gathered along the path watched in awe as Kale and Seraphine approached, hand in hand, a symbol of hope, strength, and resilience. In the days that followed, Kale focused on rebuilding and guiding his kingdom with a renewed perspective. He was still the Wolf King, feared and respected, but now tempered by understanding, trust, and the love he had found in Seraphine. She remained by his side, a constant presence, a reminder that even the strongest hearts could be guided by connection and courage. Yet Kale knew the shadows would never fully disappear. The curse was part of him, a legacy that demanded vigilance and wisdom. But now he also knew that he would never face it alone. Seraphine had become his anchor, his guide, and his equal. Together, they had faced darkness and emerged stronger, not just as individuals, but as partners bound by choice and trust. One evening, under the pale light of the full moon, Kale and Seraphine stood on the palace balcony overlooking the kingdom. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the distant howls of wolves, a reminder that the world still held wildness and danger. Kale's hand found Seraphine's, and they stood in silence, the moonlight reflecting in their eyes. "You saved me," Kale said softly, his voice almost a whisper, "not just from the shadows but from myself." Seraphine smiled, a quiet, serene expression. "And you saved me, Kale. From fear, from doubt, from the darkness that threatened to take us both. We are stronger because of each other." The Wolf King's eyes, dark and stormy, softened as he looked at her. For the first time in centuries, he felt peace, not the stillness of solitude, but the calm that comes from connection, trust, and the knowledge that love could temper even the fiercest curse. As the moon rose higher, Kale whispered into the night, "A vow not just to the kingdom but to Seraphine. Even in darkness I will find you, and no shadow, no curse, and no power will ever take you from me." Seraphine squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with the same resolve. "And I will always stand with you." The wind carried their words across the kingdom, rustling the leaves, stirring the wolves in the forest, and echoing through the cliffs. It was a promise of trust, courage, and love, a bond that no darkness could break, a connection that would guide the Wolf King and the healer through all the trials yet to come. The shadows had tested them, but they had endured. The curse remained, but it was no longer a chain, it was a part of their strength, a challenge to be met with wisdom and unity. And as the moonlight bathed the Wolf Kingdom in silver, Kale and Seraphine stood together, ready to face the future, side by side, unbroken and unafraid. For the Wolf King had learned the greatest truth of all. Even in a world of shadows, love and trust could shine brighter than any curse, and redemption was always within reach.